Welcome to the Big Dawg Crypto Podcast. This is your number one crypto podcast to hear directly from the movers and shakers, innovators, and disruptors in the cryptocurrency industry. Follow on Twitter for updates and to communicate directly at Woof Big Dawg. That's at Woof Big DAWG. Now, here is your host, the one and only Big Dawg Crypto.
And welcome to the latest episode of the Big Dawg Crypto Podcast. I'm your host, Big Dawg Crypto. And let me tell you, this account I have followed on Twitter for quite a while. I follow a lot of accounts. There's a lot of good content, but I got to put this guy in this account as one of the absolute best. Rekt Capital. How are you doing?
Hey, Big Dawg. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. And look, I'm not just saying that. I mean, it's interesting because, you're very active on Twitter. And, it's we all have accounts we like. I put yours as one of the ones that I have notifications turned on because your analysis has just been spot on. I want to ask you something. There's a few things I want to ask you, definitely. But I got to ask you this. How long have you been in crypto, and how did you originally get into crypto?
Big Dawg, thanks so much for the kind words. It really means a lot. I do put a lot of effort into the content I produce, and it's been like this for almost 6 years now. I first got into crypto in early 2017. This is when I started honing in on my craft when it comes to technical analysis and just trying to understand the markets, which are fundamentally underpinned by psychology. So psychology is one of the focus points in my technical analysis because TA is very, basically speaking, very much rooted in the extreme fear and extreme greed that we see in price. So the charts, the price action, that's essentially a historical transcript of fear and greed and human emotions. So it's all about trying to be in touch with those emotions in the charts and trying to understand that psychology. So it's been almost 6 years now that I've been sharing my insights on Rekt Capital, on Twitter, in the newsletter, YouTube as well. So it's been a while. I've been really enjoying it. And it's all about just giving a level-headed approach to understanding these market insights, the price action, just being realistic about things in a way that a weatherman would be about the weather, just trying to give a high probability idea, approach of what could happen to price going forward.
So, bringing that up, I mean, it's interesting because I've had some fantastic guests. I always appreciate everybody that takes the time, but I've never brought up anybody in any episode, some specific tweets. And I kind of want to bring up a couple of tweets to kind of explain, I guess, to the audience why I'm giving you such praise at the beginning. So this is why I like Rekt Capital stuff so much. One of your tweets I'm looking at from August 22nd, you talked about in 2015, Bitcoin bottomed 547 days before the halving. In 2018, 517 days before the halving. And that's one of those things that I really enjoy from an analyzing point of view. Could you kind of share with the audience a bit when you look at the halving and stuff in this particular tweet, what your thoughts are on that?
Absolutely. That's a tweet that encompasses some of the historical movements that we see in price when it comes to Bitcoin's price action relative and in the context of the Bitcoin halving. And I'm predominantly a technical analyst, but when we focus on the halving, that's one of the key fundamental catalysts for Bitcoin's technical price action. So the Bitcoin halving is a fundamental catalyst. It's a fundamental shift in the Bitcoin blockchain where the mining reward is cut in half every 4 years. So essentially the amount of Bitcoin that gets created every 10 minutes is cut in half every 4 years. And this halving event, this halving of that block reward, that's essentially a very strong fundamental catalyst for price action. And every 4 years, we see a cyclicality in the price action, and along with that as well, the psychology of investors. So as we, for instance, a year after the halving, that's when we tend to see the most exponential price action, where we see a lot of extreme greed, a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out, lots of people entering the market, buying Bitcoin, being very excited about the uptrend. And then after around a year after the halving, we tend to see a bull market peak occur. And then we have that bear market correction, which on average across cycles is 84.5%. Well, that's on average. We've seen a minus 93% correction in 2013-14, roughly speaking. But on average, it's 84.5%. And I think we have a correction right now of 75%, I believe, something like that. So when it comes to the halving, it's very important to just focus on these halving events. They happen every 4 years. So in November 2012, July 2016, and May 2020. And they're a very good context in just understanding where we are in the market cycle. So of course, now we're trying to find that absolute bottom. So Bitcoin is in a bottoming out phase right now. And it tends to bottom, as you mentioned, Big Dog, we tend to see a Bitcoin bottom around 500 or so days before that halving occurs. And that bottom occurs via an accumulation range of some sort, so essentially going sideways for multiple months, or we tend to see a V-shaped reversal, a bit like what we saw in March 2020, although that was a bit of a black swan event. Prior to May 2020, we actually saw an accumulation range form in December 2018. So lots going on there, lots of insights to unpack, but generally speaking, after the halving, a year after the halving, we tend to see exponential price action, a bull market peak. And then, over 500 days before the next halving, we tend to see a bottoming out process, an accumulation range. And that's been the case over the past, really in all of Bitcoin's price history.
See, and that's the thing. Like your account is one of the ones. Like I said, I love it because you've been pretty accurate with most of your stuff, pretty much almost all of it. And you have in here the bottom will occur in Q4 this year. So you do feel that you feel that we're looking at the Bitcoin bottom at some point during Q4.
Absolutely. So it really does depend on by how much will this bottoming out process extend. So we're definitely in that period where Bitcoin is trying to find an absolute bottom, and data science suggests that below 35,000 is where the bottoming out process has begun, and people worrying about buying at 21K, 22K, 23K, when you have that macro perspective of anything being sub 35K, anything being that bottoming out process, you kind of gain an appreciation as to these current prices at around 20K being a fantastic opportunity for long-term investment, especially if you bear in mind these insights that we've been talking about today, that a year after the halving, we tend to see a bull market peak, but that's when we also see exponential price increases. And speaking of the halving, I published a 4-part series on the Rekt Capital newsletter talking about these historical insights and recurring tendencies. And it's spectacular to just see how this psychology recurs over time. It's really fantastic and phenomenal to see that this psychology just repeats. History repeats itself. And the halving is a very important signpost in just giving us an idea where we are in the market cycle, but also what's the psychological sentiment predominant in the minds of investors at the moment. And at the moment, we're in extreme fear, maximum pessimism, and bargain buyers are essentially accumulating and scooping up Bitcoin at a drastic discount, and they're being patient in their buying, dollar cost averaging into these low areas of interest, and just being patient, waiting for that halving to come. And a year after the halving, that's when we're going to see that bull market top. So it's a few years ahead still, because the next Bitcoin halving is in April 2024. But there's lots to be excited about in the coming years. It will take a few years, but the wait will be most certainly worth it based on what we've seen in the past.
Well, so there's a lot of people that will listen to this that are new to the crypto space. And I always say, I've been in here a few years, and research is so important. When it comes to technical analysis, if you're a new person that's in the space, what would you advise to them that are listening to this, that just they're interested in learning about it, but they really don't know how to go about, right? Because there's stuff on YouTube, there's some good, there's a lot of bad. What would you recommend to a new person in the space of the best way to go about learning technical analysis?
That's a fantastic question, Big Dog, because I was once a beginner as well. And the way I went about it was just trying to learn everything about technical analysis through YouTube, through Twitter. Crypto Twitter is an amazing resource. Of course, you do have some bad apples. You have loads of good apples as well. And it's just all about trying to filter that content out. And that will take a lot of time. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of time to curate that feed on Crypto Twitter or even YouTube. But it's certainly worth the time to put in. Just selfishly speaking, of course, I've tried to provide level-headed analysis and just give people a no BS approach to market insights and Bitcoin's price action, as well as the altcoin price action as well. And that's why I created the Rekt Capital newsletter, where I share these insights 3 times a week: Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. And it's all about just trying to add to the community and just give us a bit more of an understanding when it comes to Bitcoin's price action, but also the space in general. So my advice would be to just follow a few accounts on Twitter, try to pay attention to what they're posting out there, not make any decisions based on what they're saying, but just to observe in terms of whether they're right, in terms of market predictions or whatever. Trying to understand, why are they posting? Are they posting for engagement, or is there a legitimate interest in people, just trying to teach people to learn about the space, to learn about TA? And posting, or at least focusing on YouTube videos, there's a lot of content out there as well. And a lot of it is very useful in just trying to understand the fundamental aspects of crypto, but also the technical analysis side of crypto as well. So it's all about just trying to immerse yourself in all the content, the good and the bad, and over time you're just going to develop a kind of feeling what's really beneficial, what adds value, and what's not necessarily a good idea to focus on. So that's my journey when I first started almost 6 years ago, and I think that's just the way to go.
Well, I asked you a question, and I hope I can add. So I kind of want to add something to like an answer. And what I mean is, the reason I'm giving praise to your accounts, and I like it so much, is because you've been accurate with your stuff. And I think in general, if you find accounts that are accurate, like go back and search. Yeah, I know some people delete stuff and all. I'm just in Twitter, right? Twitter people delete. I'm not saying you. I'm saying I've seen people do that. But overall, I'd say go look at an account, right, and see if they've been accurate with their stuff. And like I said, if you go back through your stuff and you look at it, you've been fairly accurate. And I think if you build up a repertoire, so to say, of accounts, right? You know what I mean? And I'd ask you, when you look at Twitter, you're really good at what you do. Are there certain ones, like when you're going, you know what I mean? Like there's certain ones you like to look at, or do you still do? I say, do you still do research, right? Because we're always learning stuff. But what do you do for like your research at this point in your journey, since you're where you are now?
That's a great question. My answer is going to be a bit unexpected, because at this point in time, I'm pretty much a technical analyst, a content creator, and I just don't really focus on my feed. Of course, I follow the top guys, and I have great relationships with some of them as well. But I just try to focus on my inner voice and my inner skill set that I've honed for the past few years now. And it's just tapping into those resources and trying to be innovative in the space. So for me, the goal isn't necessarily to just try and soak up all the information that I can and just try to grasp the space and then understand how it works and how crypto works and what are the fundamental catalysts that underpin crypto and how the price action behaves. That, of course, was my attitude in the beginning, that period of immersion. For me right now, it's all about actually trying to be on the forefront of the space and be innovative in just sharing insights that maybe nobody is sharing. Again, I don't necessarily look at what others are doing. I'm trying to be innovative and come up with different ways of adding value to the space and adding value to people who are observing me on Twitter or following my newsletter. And I just try to be on the cusp of the cutting edge, essentially. And that's what the newsletter is. The tagline of the newsletter is sharing cutting edge insights on Bitcoin and altcoins. And that's very much a tagline that I live by, just trying to add that value that maybe not necessarily anyone else is sharing, to give that additional edge in this market, especially as it matures and more people enter the space. You need that educated perspective. Always need to be honing your tools and honing that understanding when it comes to technicality, data science, on-chain analytics, or even just pure psychology, investor psychology, trying to understand those patterns. That's what I try to do, try to be innovative and just share that content that's as original as possible, but above all else adds value and is helpful to people just watching my content.
So how do you explain, when you talk about the death cross, and you have on here about death cross occurred in early January 22, to somebody that doesn't, and once again, I'm trying to maybe teach a little bit, in this episode, but if somebody says, what is the death cross? What's kind of the best way to kind of explain that to people that, let's say, don't have any idea, they've heard it, right? But they don't know what it is.
So the death cross, very simplistically speaking, is a crossover of two moving averages. One of those moving averages is faster. So that's the 50 exponential moving average, which takes into account the average of the past 50 days worth of price action. So that's one moving average, and that crosses under the longer moving average, which is the 200-day EMA, and that takes into account the past 200 days worth of price action, an average of that. So naturally, the 50-day is going to take into account less price action, so it's going to be more sensitive and susceptible to changes in price action. So that's the one that tends to cross below the 200-day, which is less sensitive because it takes into account more days worth of price action. So on a technical perspective, that's a death cross, the 50-day crossing down below the 200-day moving average. And this is an important technical indicator, or at least phenomenon, because when we see a bearish crossover, and that's the death cross, that's when we tend to see significant retracements and corrections in Bitcoin's price action. And I actually posted a thread, and I think, Big Dog, this is what you're referencing to, that thread that I posted on historically recurring tendencies in death crosses. And in the past, it's very interesting how this is all recurring. There is a psychology recurring there across history. Whenever we see a death cross, we tend to see retracement, a quite significant retracement. And I actually have that thread pinned on my Twitter, and you can see how things have played out since then. And it's pretty amazing to see how things have been just following history. So it's not about me being necessarily accurate, because I just try to be a historian, a technical historian, which just says how it is. How is the price action? What is it telling us? And I just say what it's telling me, essentially. So it's not me about not me being accurate per se, but how history is essentially repeating. Because if you grasp the historical tendencies and the psychological elements that are recurring in price, then we can actually predict the future with relative accuracy. So for instance, in this current death cross period, in November, I think we saw a death cross happen, or at least in November, we saw a 40% or 50% retracement, and then we saw the death cross occur. And in my thread, I essentially mentioned a principle that when we see a retracement before the death cross, that same depth of retracement will likely occur after the death cross. So we saw a 50% drop in November, or since November, the death cross happened. And then we've seen another 50% drop since that death cross. And this has happened across time many, many times. So it's interesting to just see that history repeat itself.
Well, do you think, and I love to know this, especially as you've analyzed a lot of stuff, when you look at Bitcoin and Ethereum, do you see, and I guess maybe we're saying prediction here, do you think Ethereum ever flips Bitcoin?
The age-old question.
Like, and I know we're kind of guessing the future here. I mean, and this is more of a speculative thing, but what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it could happen, or even temporarily?
It's an interesting question. Every bull cycle, we have new narratives. So we always have the narrative of Ethereum flipping Bitcoin. We also have the narrative that institutional interest is entering the space, and therefore we're never going to see another bear market again. That's also a narrative. And I actually spoke about this narrative in October. I think that many people think that institutional interest is going to be so large right now that we can't see a 80% bear market ever. And if you just look at one of my tweets in October 2021, you'll notice that it was very popular because it was a contrarian approach that we are probably going to see an 80% plus bear market. So far, we've seen a 70% plus, but those are just some of the narratives, Big Dog. Ethereum flipping Bitcoin is also another narrative. And I mean, it comes from somewhere. That narrative is popular at certain times in the market. Of course, it isn't popular right now, but rest assured, we're going to see that narrative pop up in the next few years or so. The flipping hasn't happened thus far in these 10 or so years that Bitcoin has been around, and Ethereum has been around for a little shorter time than that. But Ethereum has a very important role when it comes to altcoins. It's the leading indicator for altcoins. So whatever Ethereum does, it often leads the charge for altcoins, and it actually promotes money flow into altcoins. And Ethereum promoting money flow into altcoins, well, first of all, Bitcoin needs to make a move, and Bitcoin needs to consolidate to enable that money flow into Ethereum, and then Ethereum enabling that money flow into altcoins. So Ethereum is very much associated in Bitcoin in very fundamental and nuanced ways. So Ethereum flipping Bitcoin over the next years, decade or so, it would be quite surprising for me because of how the money flow structure is. So first of all, people have fiat, they have the pound, the euro, the US dollar. Then they buy crypto, and that's going to be the first one, the one with the biggest market cap. So that's Bitcoin. And then once they see profit on their Bitcoin, they're going to circulate that profit into large caps like Ethereum, like Ripple, or even Chainlink and others. And then they see profits grow there. And then they just circulate their profits into mid cap altcoins and low cap altcoins. And this money flow cycle essentially is seeing profit get circulated into riskier and riskier assets with lower and lower market caps. So it's Ethereum as an integral plays an integral part in this money flow cycle, but I struggle to see it flipping Bitcoin, whereby Ethereum is going to be the main cryptocurrency that everybody buys, and money flows into Bitcoin, and then from Bitcoin into other altcoins. So over time, anything is possible. Never say never, but I don't see that happening in the next several years. It hasn't happened thus far. And from what we've seen in bull cycles, Ethereum is still struggling to break some key psychological price points. For instance, many people talk about Ethereum reaching 5K or 10K, and we haven't yet been there. So right. Ethereum definitely needs to reach some of those milestones first.
Well, you just helped me seg into the next thing that I wanted to ask is the alt season. As we know, people in the space love to talk alt season. I think I did a poll the other day asking, when do you think it's going to happen? And, some people said a few months, maybe next quarter, maybe next year. And of course, I say in the full capitulation mode, some people get in, it's never going to happen again. You know what I mean? Like, you got that now. So I'll ask you once again, looking at it with your opinions right now, and then even with your research and looking at, past trends, when could you see us having another alt season?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And, given where we are in the market cycle right now, Bitcoin's still trying to find its bear market bottom. It's in the bottoming out phase. Whether or not an absolute bottom is in already or it's still yet to come, and history suggests it's still yet to come, we're still in this bottoming out process. And when Bitcoin is trying to find a bear market bottom, once it finds it, it's going to build an accumulation range. And during periods of consolidation is where we see altcoins do quite well. But altcoins tend to do very well, not at bear market bottoms for Bitcoin, but we tend to see altcoin money flow occur in bull markets. So first and foremost, we have to just outline that we're not going to see an alt season, a full-blown alt season where money flow is trickling into altcoins anytime soon, simply because people are, remember where we are in the market cycle, the extreme fear and maximum pessimism of the bear market bottom. Nobody's interested aside from bargain buyers who are patiently accumulating dollar cost averaging over time. So first of all, if we just think about the money flow cycle from fiat to Bitcoin to altcoins, at the moment, we're still in that money flow cycle where fiat investors aren't quite ready to buy Bitcoin yet. So we have to see more and more investors pile into Bitcoin so that we have enough profit occurring in the portfolios of those early buyers so that they're gaining a risk-seeking approach gradually over time before circulating some of those profits and gaining that more risk-seeking approach in their investing. And for that to happen, for that psychology in the money flow cycle to occur, Bitcoin has to break out from its accumulation range and begin a new macro uptrend. And we have to enjoy the Bitcoin bull market for quite some time before that profit circulation occurs into altcoins. So that's still a ways away, in my opinion. And just to mention as a side note, one of the best technical indicators to just understand when alt season could occur is Bitcoin dominance. And that's a technical indicator that, very simplistically speaking, is how much money is located in the Bitcoin market versus the altcoin market. And at this point in time, Bitcoin dominance is relatively low because most people aren't interested in Bitcoin. Predominantly, investors are still sidelined in cash, waiting for that moment. And whenever that moment is to buy at the bottom or buy once Bitcoin has appreciated 100, 200, 300%, whenever that moment is, at the moment, the Bitcoin dominance figure is very low, and it's probably going to see a reversal in the future. And in the future, I mean, perhaps late this year, early next year, because Bitcoin dominance has to increase quite substantially for that money flow to be triggered into Bitcoin. And then once Bitcoin dominance starts to drop after a prolonged uptrend, that's when we start to see that trickling of money into altcoins. So essentially, when Bitcoin dominance goes up, that's when you want to be in Bitcoin or cash, depending on where we are in the market cycle, but not in altcoins, because that's when we see a lot of panic selling and shedding of valuations in altcoin prices. But when Bitcoin dominance starts to decline, that's when you want to follow the money flow. And that's when money flows away from Bitcoin into altcoins. So at the moment, Bitcoin needs to enjoy a strong uptrend in Bitcoin dominance. And because of that, we're not going to see a sustained, prolonged alt season for several months.
So, well, that's one of the things that people love to talk about on crypto Twitter, and I always like to ask. So I had to ask you that. Okay, so a couple of last questions, kind of a personal, because I like to know, more about the guest and to let the audience know and your fans on crypto Twitter and stuff. Your favorite food, if you're going out to eat, you have your choice. What's your favorite food or two?
Oh, wow. I wasn't anticipating this question. I'd need to think about it. Whenever someone's hungry, there's a quick response to that. I actually ate before this episode. So I really enjoy octopus. When I went to Spain to Sevilla for my holiday, I tried the best fried octopus in my life. I was surprised that it wasn't, spongy. It was really something fantastic. And that's a memory that lives with me to this day. It's been several months now.
Nice. And it's kind of random because let's be honest, you'd be like, well, I like seafood, I like steak lately. So I mean, there's so much good stuff. And then when you're working, when you're putting the time in, you're on there. What do you have on the background? Do you have podcasts? Do you have music? Do you have TV? What's your background vibe going on while you're working?
Yeah, interesting question. I actually work in silence. I don't want anything to distract me. Yeah. I just noticed that music or podcasts or anything that kind of distracts me from the creative process, from me being truly zoned in and just being alone with my thoughts and being alone with the charts and just trying to read things as accurately as possible without any interference. So That's definitely when I in the mornings I do some of my deep work, deep focus, and then as the day goes by, I'll probably turn on a bit of music and just scan the charts and create some content. But yeah, for deep work, just pure silence.
Okay, cool. All right. So if people are trying to find you, where do they find you on Twitter? And also to your newsletter, I'd like to find out if somebody wants to subscribe to that. What's the best way to do that?
So if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, just feel free to go to @RektCapital. And for my newsletter, it's rektcapital.substack.com. The links are in my bio on my profile. And of course, if you'd like to follow me on YouTube for video content, that's Rekt Capital as well on YouTube. And that's about it.
Okay, I appreciate it. Well, look, I appreciate you making the time to be on the podcast. Like I said, man, I've wanted you on for a while, and I think this is going to be a great episode. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Big Dog. It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me, and looking forward to the next time.
Absolutely. And this is the latest episode of the Big Dawg Crypto Podcast. Thanks so much for listening.
You've been listening to the Big Dawg Crypto Podcast. Follow on Twitter @WoofBigDawg. Woof. Big DAWG, and run faster than the competition. Woof, woof.